They say you still can't stop by the old road after sunset in those parts. The wind blowing across the parched plains of Kansas carries more than just dust, it whispers. Sometimes you can hear words in these rustles, as if someone is trying to tell you about what happened here many years ago. The old folks from Ellsworth say that the land there does not accept rain, that those who have not been released from the road still lie under it. This is a story about the Milton brothers, about a farm where you could get in, but not leave. The farm stood on the edge of the wasteland, off the main highway, where even birds rarely wandered. The house was grey and tall, as if made of the wind itself. The wooden walls creaked even on windless days, and the windows, which were unlit, reflected the sunset like eyes tired from watching for a long time. George and Lucas Milton have lived here since they were born, ever since their father, returning from the war, built a house on land that no one else wanted to plough. It was said that before him there was a squatter camp here. Then there were burials of cattle that died of the disease. But the Miltons didn't believe in bad omens. They just worked. At first, the farm seemed ordinary. Herds of cows, granary, barn. People from the neighboring town visited them, sometimes for hay, sometimes for grain, and left with a feeling of slight anxiety, as if they had left something behind them that was not worth touching. George, the eldest, didn't talk much, but he always looked straight into the eyes. There was something too calm in his gaze, as if there was no fear or doubt left inside him. Lucas, on the other hand, avoided glances. He was often seen at the well, staring into the black depths until the sun sank below the horizon. Once upon a time, in the evenings, sounds could be heard from the farm, creaking floorboards, footsteps, thuds, as if someone was dragging heavy bags. The neighbors thought they were working. After all, the Miltons worked 7 days a week, but then someone noticed that the lights in the barn were never turned off, and that steam comes out after midnight, as if from a damp earth heated from the inside. The first disappearance in the area occurred in the year when the drought burned the crops. A student from Kansas City who was hitchhiking through Ellsworth disappeared. The car was found abandoned at the intersection, but he himself was never found. Then the trucker disappeared, then a married couple. But the county was big, and the sheriff blamed it all on tramps or accidents. No one connected it to the Milton brothers. No one, except perhaps the earth itself, which was beginning to rot from the inside. As the sun sank below the horizon, the air on the farm became thick as smoke. It smelled of iron, dust, and something else, sweet, like the smell of old blood. George closed the shutters, and Lucas went out into the field and stood there until nightfall. Sometimes he whispered something in the direction of the forest belt, where no one had lived for many years. At night, the wind brought a strange sound from those places, as if someone was quietly tapping on an empty bucket, somewhere deep underground. It took several months before someone stopped at the Milton gate again. He was a middle-aged man with a tired face and a faded army jacket. His name was Tom Banks. They said he was driving home from Wichita when his car stalled. He saw the light in the house and asked for help. He was last seen walking along the gravel path to the porch of the farm. That night, the moon was cloudy and overcast, and a pall of mist hung over the earth as if it grew out of the very soil. In the morning, the lights in the windows of the farm were still on, but there was no car or footprints on the road. 2 days later, Tom's wife called the sheriff's department and said that her husband had sent her a short message. "I'm on a farm with 2 brothers. They're weird." After that, there's silence. When the police arrived, George met them on the doorstep. He looked calm and polite, as if he didn't understand why all the fuss was going on. Lucas was standing nearby behind him with a shovel in his hands. The house was clean. No footprints, no evidence. There was only a strange silence, as if the walls were absorbing the sound. The barn smelled of damp and lime, but no one paid much attention to it at the time. They left with nothing, but the brothers stayed on their land. After that, conversations began in the neighborhood. People whispered that they had seen lights on the farm at night, steady, pale, like lanterns floating above the ground. Someone claimed that they heard singing, not human, but strangely melodious, as if the wind was trying to repeat words that no one had learned. Several teenagers decided to check out the legend and went to the abandoned field where the farm stood. Only 2 of them returned. One of them later said that something was moving under the barn. Not a beast, not a man, something that breathed slowly like the earth after rain. But soon they stopped talking about the farm. It was as if the place itself was replacing the memory of itself. Those who passed by could not remember what they had seen. The road to the Milton house seemed to disappear into the fog, like a mirage. Only the rare travelers who wandered too far still noticed the old gate and the sign tilted to one side, where the words Milton Farm were barely legible. Since then, everything has been changing. A strange ringing appeared in the air, like a vibration barely discernible by the ear. The birds stopped landing on the wires leading to the house. Even the dogs that passed by stopped and growled at nothing. The earth itself seemed to be exhaling. One night, a few weeks after Tom Banks disappeared, smoke was spotted over the farm. When the locals arrived, the barn was closed, but a thin trickle of something black and thick was oozing under the door. There was a burning smell inside, although nothing was burning, and then a light appeared in the sky above the fields, not like lightning, not like fire. He moved slowly, as if someone was holding him by an invisible thread. Since then, this place has stopped being just a farm. It became alive. Every evening the wind brought a soft hum from those parts, like the breathing of a huge animal underground. People were saying that George and Lucas didn't go out anymore, that now they only talk to each other, and with those who can no longer answer. And when the police returned a few months later with a search warrant, they found what they were looking for. There was a trap door under the barn, behind a layer of fresh earth, and below him was a staircase leading down into a darkness where not even air could penetrate. There, among the lime and clay, lay the bodies, more than 30, people, animals, bones, all mixed up, as if someone was trying to assemble a new order out of them. Everything was laid out with frightening neatness. Every body is in its place. When George was asked why, he answered calmly, without a shadow of horror, "We didn't kill them. We were saving them from the road." After that, his brother died in the cell, as if he had fallen asleep. And George, he lived in the clinic for another 5 years. But every night, when the fog descended on the farm, people swore that they saw a figure in the field, in a faded shirt, standing motionless among the weeds, where bodies once moved underground. After the Milton barn revealed its secrets, the air around the farm became even denser. At night, it seemed as if the earth itself was breathing underfoot, as if someone was watching every step. The fields, previously calm and familiar, were now moving with a barely noticeable tremor, as if something was moving inside the soil, rising to the surface. The fog that descended on the farm after sunset became thick, almost impenetrable, and the wind, when it came in from the west, brought the smell of iron and tar, a smell that remained on the skin for hours. It was impossible to get rid of it. The residents of Ellsworth began to notice the oddities even before the official publication of the investigation. Animals disappeared on the roads, especially small cattle and birds, which used to fearlessly walk around the neighborhood. Sometimes people saw silhouettes, tall, angular, with heavy steps, gliding through the trees. No one could explain what it was, but everyone felt that it wasn't just animals, and it wasn't the wind playing with the trees. Inside the Milton house itself, things got weirder. Even after the police removed the bodies, the walls seemed to remember the smells, sounds, and presence of strangers. The floors creaked, although no one was walking. The doors slammed softly, and the stairs to the second floor sometimes shook, as if someone invisible was descending it. George and Lucas no longer appeared on the street, but neighbors said they sometimes saw light through the windows, steady, white, almost painful, which slowly moved from room to room. Families from nearby homes began to close their shutters at night and not leave their homes. Those who tried to pass by the farm seemed to be drawn back to the gate. Hitchhikers and truckers have stopped stopping in this side of the county. The road that used to be simple now seemed like a maze changing shape. The wind carried with it rustles and a low rumble that made one's heart ache. The first documented evidence of strange lights and sounds came a few weeks later. One farmer said that he saw a faint haze rising from under the barn, glowing with a pale greenish hue, as if the soil had decided to shine on its own. Inside the barn, he said, there were thuds, not human, not animal, but like someone rhythmically hitting wooden beams, testing the strength of the structure. George, who remained in the house, continued to run the house as if nothing had happened. He appeared outside in the morning when the wind was weak, checked the grain and livestock, returning inside when the sun was setting. Lucas disappeared into the fields, and no one saw him return. Sometimes at night, neighbors would hear a soft moo mixed with whispers coming from the farm grounds. It was strange, not human, but not animal either, as if the earth itself was trying to talk to people. One day, a paranormal researcher appeared in the neighborhood. He came from the city with a camera, a tape recorder, and strange devices, promising to prove the existence of the unusual. He spent the night at the farm, watching the barn. In the morning, he was found on the road, pale, trembling, and with almost no memory of what had happened. The only thing he could tell was the feeling of pressure, as if hundreds of eyes were hovering around him, and whispers that he couldn't understand, but they made his blood run cold. The fields were becoming more dangerous every day. The plants grew slowly and crookedly, and the weeds took on a strange shape, resembling the shadows of people. Sometimes it seemed that someone was sliding through the grass, barely touching the ground. The road to the barn seemed to lengthen as strangers tried to walk along it. Nothing remained the same. The wind, the soil, the trees, even the light of the sun, everything became part of a strange, slowly spreading horror. The sheriff who investigated the disappearances admitted that he felt fear for the first time in his life. He came to the farm several times, but each time he left empty-handed, and with the feeling that someone was watching him not with his eyes, but with the land itself. Reports from the city reported missing animals, strange lights and rumblings heard at night, and locals began to whisper that the road to the farm was now irretrievable. Strange things started happening inside the barn. The boards creaked and cracked for no apparent reason, and sometimes there were sounds as if someone was slowly moving heavy objects. The smell of earth and lime was so strong that sometimes it was felt even through closed doors and windows. Some claimed to have seen silhouettes standing under the trapdoor leading to the dungeon, as if the ghosts were waiting for someone or something. The locals talked about fog nights, when the entire area was shrouded in a dense grey blanket. On these nights, people stopped hearing the cries of animals and conversations on the road. The sounds were muffled, as if nature itself had silenced them so that no one could remember what they had seen or heard. Those who tried to approach the farm spoke of sudden weakness, chest pressure, and an uneasy feeling that their steps were leading not just to the Milton house, but into the depths of something irrevocable. George continued to run the household, but behind his calmness there was anxiety. He worked in the fields until dusk, checking the barn and the land around it, as if he was observing something that had no name. Lucas had completely disappeared. Some claimed to have seen his figure in the field on a foggy night, standing motionless between the weeds and mold of the earth, as if he had become part of the farm. Every day the legend of the farm grew. Travelers began to avoid it. Stories about the missing spread further and further, and the farm seemed to absorb everything that fell on its land. People said that under the barn, among the layers of lime, the earth still holds those who could not return. And even years after the burning of the house, silhouettes, lights, and rustles sometimes appeared in this place, making you forget the way back. After the discovery of the secret basement, the barn became the center of a dark legend. People who lived in the area said that even weeks later, the smell of earth and lime continued to trail behind the wind, enveloping everything around. Everyone who passed by the farm felt an elusive pressure, as if the earth itself was trying to pull the stranger into itself. Inside the house, George continued to act quietly and steadily, working with grain, cattle, and outbuildings, but all his movements were careful, as if he was afraid that any sudden gesture would upset the delicate balance between the surface and what lurked beneath it. People began to notice strange movements on the farm at night. Sometimes faint lights appeared above the fields, greenish-yellow, almost ghostly, which slowly moved along the horizon, as if someone was checking the boundaries of the territory. Through the fog that spread over the lowlands, a soft ringing could be heard, as if someone was slowly moving heavy objects from the ground. Residents of the neighborhood were afraid to even look in that direction, and rumors of a road without return began to take shape in conversations. At night, the wind brought sounds similar to footsteps and scraping, but they did not match what could be seen. At first it seemed like a mind game, but gradually the locals began to realize that the sounds were not coming from the surface. Someone claimed to have heard a slow whisper, shimmering and unsteady, as if the earth itself was trying to speak. but its language was incomprehensible to man. This whisper changed, then subsided, then intensified, creating the feeling that someone was watching everyone. Inside the house, George began to spend more and more time in the barn. His movements were measured, almost meditative. He checked wooden beams, measured soil moisture, examined every crack in the walls. He seemed to be talking to the earth itself, listening to its breathing. People who watched him from afar spoke of the strange harmony in his movements. There was no anxiety or joy in them, just an unwavering attention to what was hidden beneath the surface. Lucas had disappeared completely. No one saw him, and soon the rumors began to mix with the facts. Some claimed that he became part of the basement, dissolved into a layer of earth and lime. Others said that he controlled the light and fog on the farm, as if he were the guardian of the boundary between the surface and depth. Strange markings appeared on the margins, long furrows, crooked and neat at the same time, resembling lines on old maps or signs left for someone who knows how to read them. Soon the farm was no longer a place where you could just walk in. Travelers who happened to be nearby told of a sudden weakness, a feeling that the air was pressing on their chest. They could hear the soft, rhythmic breathing that did not belong to either man or animal. At night, the light from the barn sometimes peeked out through the fog, changing shades and shapes. It seemed that the house, the earth, and the basement together create something alive that watches and waits. The police tried to approach the farm again. One of the officers described that when he approached the barn, the ground under his feet seemed to be pulled down. The creaking of floorboards, the noise in the walls, all this increased with every step until he stopped, squeezing his chest and feeling that his heart was trying to escape. Other participants in the investigation noted the same thing. The space around the farm is changing. Light and sound behave illogically, as if the farm exists in its own time and spatial zone. Residents began to notice unexplained phenomena in the fields around the barn. The silhouettes moved without leaving any traces. Sometimes they saw a light fog appear above the ground, taking the form of a person, but disappearing when they tried to approach. The forest belt near the farm became especially dangerous. Cracks in the ground, from which warm air poured out, created the feeling that there was a void underfoot. Paranormal researchers who arrived with equipment recorded anomalies. Magnetic devices began to jump. Cameras recorded faint points of light. Sound recorders picked up low-frequency hum and whispers that could not be understood. Those who spent at least one night there returned pale, silent, and forgetful, unable to describe the fullness of their feelings. George continued to control the territory. He checked the barn, the land around it, and sometimes went out into the fields at dawn. People watching from afar said that he was moving as part of the space, as if the farm itself was guiding him. No screams, no sounds, no threats from outside could distract his attention. He seemed to understand something that no one else understood. Meanwhile, the earth itself under the barn seemed to be gathering a presence. People passing nearby felt that it was empty and deep under their feet, although the surface was flat. Through the layers of lime and clay, soft bumps and rustles could be heard every now and then, as if someone was rearranging heavy objects or moving bodies left here in the distant past. Each sound increased the feeling of anxiety and an involuntary premonition of something imminent. Gradually, the legend of the farm began to spread far beyond the borders of the district. Travelers avoided it, truckers avoided the road, and locals whispered that there was more than just a basement under the barn, a place where earth and death merged into one. And even years after the disappearances and burning of the house, sometimes there were quiet sounds, lights and rustles, reminding that the road there leads only one way. After the land under the barn revealed its secrets, the Milton farm became more than just an abandoned house. The nights here were thick, almost tangible, and it seemed that the fog that descended from the horizon was not randomly hovering over the fields. The neighbors began to notice that even the slightest movement of the wind causes strange fluctuations in the fields. The grass bends, as if leaning towards something alive, invisible. The light coming from the barn was no longer uniform. It was changing hues, shifting from pale green to barely discernible purple, creating a sense of the presence of something alien, watching every step. George continued to run the household, but his actions were careful and precise. He moved slowly, checking every detail, closing shutters tightly, inspecting grain, cattle, barn boards. He seemed to maintain a balance between the surface and what was hidden beneath it. Lucas had completely disappeared, and even the rumors about his presence had become vague. Sometimes people saw a figure in the field, but it disappeared into the fog, leaving only a feeling of cold breathing and observation. At night, the noises of the barn became more and more pronounced. The creaking of floorboards, thuds, and a soft clink like metal hitting wood all reinforced the feeling that someone or something was living underground. Locals began to avoid the road leading to the farm, and those who happened to be nearby reported feeling suddenly weak and panicked, as if something invisible was trying to hold them in place. New evidence has emerged. One farmer claimed to have seen glowing dots in the field moving between the weeds, which disappeared as they approached. Another told of a fog that took the form of a man standing still, only slightly swaying in the wind, although there was no tree or shrub around. These phenomena could not be explained by the law of physics or nature. They belonged to something alien, beyond the control of reason. Paranormal researchers came again and again, but each time their instruments recorded anomalies, incomprehensible and strange. Cameras captured barely discernible silhouettes, magnetic devices bounced for no reason, and sound recorders picked up low-frequency vibrations and whispers that could not be deciphered. Those who tried to stay on the farm for more than one night cycle returned pale and silent, unable to describe everything they saw and heard. The locals started talking about fog nights, special nights when the whole neighborhood was shrouded in a dense gray blanket that drowned out the usual sounds. On these nights, it seemed that the space around the farm was changing. The road gets longer, the fields bend, and the light that could be seen during the day disappears. The wind carries a whisper, a breath, a hum that compresses the chest and does not allow breathing. Passers-by who happened to be here often lost their bearings and only miraculously got back to civilization. George became more and more withdrawn. He spent his days in the barn, checking the walls, beams, and the ground around him. Every movement was neat, precise, as if he was obeying some invisible logic that no one else understood. He followed the light, the fog, the sounds, and it seemed that all this was as important to him as air or water. New signs appeared in the fields. The grass swayed in strange patterns, forming long lines and curves that looked like symbols or maps. Sometimes locals saw dark silhouettes gliding between these patterns, disappearing into the fog so quickly that it was impossible to tell if it was a person or something else. The animals began to be afraid of these places. The cows stopped entering the pasture next to the barn. The birds no longer sat on the wires, and the dogs that passed by fell silent and growled into the void. One night, George went down to the basement with a flashlight and tools. He checked every crack, every limestone slab. Deep in the basement, the ground vibrated underfoot. The soft thuds repeated over and over again. It seemed that the dungeon wasn't just storing bodies, but living its own life. Time flowed differently there. A few minutes could stretch into hours, and the light of the lantern seemed to move more slowly than in the world above the ground. Gradually, the legend of the farm began to spread beyond the borders of the district. Travelers avoided it. Truckers changed routes, and locals said that the road there leads only one way. Every mention of light, fog, or whisper became part of a complex, frightening image that was hard to forget. The light in the barn windows was now constant. He appeared at dusk and disappeared only by dawn, leaving behind a feeling of emptiness and anxiety. George moved between light and shadow, like a guardian who understands that a farm is not just a house, but a portal between the surface and the depths, and the fog, the wind, the earth, and the whispers became part of his life, part of a space that no longer belonged to humans. And even years later, when the farm was burned down, some said that on the site of the barn at night you can see a faint light, feel the cold breath of the earth, and hear barely discernible whispers, a memory that the road leads there forever. But there is no return. After the police found the bodies under the barn, the Milton farm finally turned into a place that was impossible to talk about without fear. The earth under the barn, soaked in lime and blood, seemed to breathe itself, holding the memory of everyone who crossed its boundaries. The wind over the fields had turned cold, even in summer, and carried the smell of metal, rotten grass, and something old that defied explanation. Locals stopped appearing on the road near the farm, and travelers who got too close returned pale, with trembling hands, unable to tell what they saw. George Milton continued to live in the territory, but his life turned into an endless ritual of observation. He walked around the barn, checked the ground, measured the soil moisture, examined the beams and boards. His eyes, emotionless and cold, recorded everything that was happening around him. Lucas died in his cell without leaving a confession, but people continued to see his figure in the misty depths of the fields, motionless, as if he had become part of the earth itself. Those who once tried to approach the farm spoke of strange lights changing color and shape, of whispers and sounds that could not be explained. Silhouettes appeared through the fog, long and tall, sometimes resembling people, but at the same time moving unrealistically smoothly, without shadows and traces. The road leading to the barn and the fields around it seemed alive. It changed its shape, stretched and contracted, until the passerby found himself inside a maze from which it was impossible to escape without the help of chance. After the burning of the house and barn, the legend did not disappear. The earth continued to hold the memory of what was hidden beneath it. Light, whispers, and fog appeared at the sight of the ruins, making one forget the way back. Travelers trying to pass by felt pressure squeezing their chests, sudden weakness, and overwhelming fear. People who lived nearby said that the land where the farm stood had become a repository of alien horror that defied understanding. George was declared insane and sent to a psychiatric hospital where he spent 5 years. There he could not explain what he was doing on the farm or why, but his every look and gesture betrayed knowledge of something that no one else understood. When he committed suicide, it seemed that he had taken with him the last thread of connection between the world of the living and what was underground on the Milton farm. But the land remained. To this day, the locals call that place the Road of No Return. Sometimes, especially at dusk or foggy nights, those who drive by see a faint light among the ruins, hear whispers or rhythmic knocking coming from underground. It is said that the earth itself preserves those who have crossed the threshold of the farm, and the fog, light, and wind create the illusion of movement, as if the souls of those who have not returned continue to be present there. Local stories tell of how the farm devoured all living things that happened to be nearby. Animals disappeared without a trace, plants grew crookedly and strangely, and the soil moved as if someone was breathing inside it. People stopped walking along the farm road even during the day. In the evening, it was shrouded in fog, which became dense and viscous, and the wind brought with it echoes of whispers and sounds, resembling the impact of heavy objects on lime and earth. Over time, stories about the Miltons became part of local folklore. Travelers coming to the district learned about the road without return and immediately changed the route. Those who happened to be too close talked about the strange cold, weakness, and fear that gripped the whole body. And even though the house and barn had burned down long ago, the earth continued to hold a memory, and the fog, light, and whispers became a warning. Whoever set foot on this path would not be able to return. That's how the story of the Milton family ended. Two brothers who seemed like ordinary farmers, but turned their home into a place where death, earth, and fog intertwined in a single incomprehensible ritual. And even though many years have passed, the legend of the road without return lives on, reminding that there are places where a person comes once and does not return from, even if it seems that all this has long been forgotten. After the burning of the barn and the house, the place did not become empty. The earth remained heavy, saturated with what could not only be called memory. The fog that descended on the fields after sunset was thick, almost blocking out light, and resembled a dense curtain behind which an unknown life was hidden. Travelers who dared to pass by felt an invisible presence, a cold pressing on their chest, a faint tremor of the ground under their feet, and a quiet rhythm similar to footsteps, although there was no human or animal around. The nights have become longer and quieter than before. The stars above the fields seemed dim, as if the twinkling lights were afraid to illuminate the land where the Milton farm once stood. The shadow left by the burned buildings sometimes formed into a silhouette resembling a man, but did not move, as if watching, and the few who dared to look spoke of a whisper, barely audible, writhing in the wind, repeating other people's names, but changed so that it became incomprehensible and scary. Locals began to notice strange changes in the fields. The grass grew strangely, unevenly, twisting in lines similar to old signs or maps. The ground shook at times, even though there was nothing underneath. The sky sometimes changed shades, shimmering with pale green or purple light, reflecting on the remaining ruins of the barn and creating the illusion of movement among the fields. It seemed that nature itself was trying to preserve the memory of what happened here, reviving it in forms that man could not explain. Passers-by reported unusual phenomena. They saw silhouettes that moved to the rhythm of the wind, disappearing into the fog, leaving behind a sense of the presence of something huge but invisible. The sounds of footsteps, creaking floorboards, and knocking, similar to blows on wood, were repeated in the distance, where there were no buildings. And even those who approached the fields only during the day felt a strange pressure, as if the earth itself was pulling them inside, holding them back. Some old people remembered the days when George and Lucas were alive. They said that the brothers were able to communicate with the earth, hear its breathing, and predict what would happen. But now the earth itself has become the master of space, and light, whispers, and fog are its tools. The road to the ruins wasn't just a road. It turned into a maze that could only be traversed once. Paranormal researchers kept coming. The cameras recorded strange spots of light. The instruments jumped without explanation. At night, sound recorders picked up a low-frequency hum, slowly pulsating, like the breathing of a huge creature underground. Those who tried to stay in place for more than one night returned silent, with pale faces and trembling in their bodies. And yet, despite the destruction and death, the earth remained alive. The legend of the Road of No Return continued to spread. Travelers avoided it, and those who happened to be too close felt cold breath, weakness, and fear. The light appeared among the ruins again. The whispers were repeated. The wind brought the sounds of footsteps and blows, and the earth continued to store what George and Lucas had left in it, not just bodies, but memories that defied death. Every day after the burning of the barn and the house, the Milton farm turned into a place where time and space ceased to obey the usual laws. The fog grew thicker and thicker, descending on the fields before dusk, as if the night sky was adjusting to the rhythm of the earth itself. Passers-by felt the air thicken. Their breathing became difficult, and their hearts seemed to contract under the weight of an invisible hand. The light from the remains of the barn sometimes appeared as pale spots that moved across the fields, like living creatures with no beginning or end. People began to notice new anomalies. The wind carried not just noise, but something resembling whispers in a language that could not be understood. Sometimes it was like someone breathing, soft and rhythmic. Sometimes it was like a blow coming from the ground itself. Silhouettes in the fog moved against the wind, disappearing before my eyes, leaving behind a sense of the presence of something ancient and unyielding. Even animals were afraid of these places. Cows did not enter the pasture. Birds avoided trees on the horizon, and dogs that happened to be nearby fell silent and froze, raising their fur. The fields began to change. The grass grew crookedly, twisting into patterns that resembled symbols or ancient writings. Sometimes they formed into long lines, as if guiding someone or warning them. The fog played with these lines, creating a sense of movement where there was none. At times it seemed that the ground beneath his feet was shaking and moving, as if someone alive was slowly moving under the surface, watching everyone who was trying to approach. Paranormal researchers came again, but their instruments recorded only strange vibrations, silhouettes on cameras, and a low-frequency hum. Sound recorders picked up whispers that could not be deciphered. Those who tried to spend at least one night on the farm returned pale, trembling and silent. Some of them later claimed to have seen George or Lucius standing between shadow and light, watching, but disappearing into the mist before anyone could figure out who it was. Locals talked about observation nights, when the earth seemed to come alive. The fog was thickening to such an extent that the light of the lantern could not penetrate beyond a few steps. Footsteps, thuds, and soft sounds echoed the rhythm of the human heart through the haze, but their source remained unknown. Those who tried to approach felt an invisible pressure on their chest and hopelessness, as if the earth itself was trying to keep them here forever. George continued to be present on the property, checking the remains of the barn and the land around it. He moved slowly, each step measured and careful, as if obeying some invisible logic that no one else could understand. His gaze was cold and unwavering, and his movements were calm and precise. It seemed that he had become a part of the farm itself, its guardian and guardian of what was hidden underground. Lucas disappeared completely, but the legends about him continued to live. In the misty depths of the fields, his figure could sometimes be seen, motionless, tall, with unnatural breathing, as if he was watching everyone who dares to approach. The locals whispered that the farm was no longer just a place. It was a living memory of the past, a maze in which the road led only one way. Light, fog, and whispers became constant companions of the ruins. Travelers avoided them, truckers changed routes, and those who happened to be too close felt the cold breath of the earth, weakness, and fear. Even years after the burning of the house and barn, the land continued to preserve the memory of the Miltons and their strange rituals. The place where the brothers once lived has become a portal between the surface and the depths, and the road without return is a warning to anyone who is looking for a shortcut through a foreign land. When night fell on the plain around the Milton farm, it wasn't just darkness. It was a thick, tangible mass that compressed the air and made every movement difficult. The fog descended early and slowly, tightly enveloping the remains of the barn, stretching across the fields, as if invisible hands were reaching for the ground. Travelers who happened to be nearby noticed that each step became more difficult than the previous one. The ground beneath her feet seemed unstable, soft, and sometimes trembled, as if something was moving inside her, watching and waiting for the moment when she could draw in a new guest. The light that occasionally appeared among the ruins was strange. It had no source, and its hues varied from pale green to almost transparent purple. Sometimes it seemed that he was moving like a living being, gliding across the ground and illuminating silhouettes that did not belong to the world of the living. These silhouettes were tall, thin, with uneven, crooked outlines. They weren't in a hurry, they weren't running, they were watching, and the few who saw them felt both fear and a strange attraction, as if an invisible force was beckoning them to themselves. The fields around the farm began to change. The grass grew crookedly, twisting into strange patterns. These lines seemed organized, as if someone or something was drawing symbols or maps on the ground that only those who had long lost their minds could decipher. At times, the patterns seemed to have a life of their own. The wind bent them, creating the illusion of movement, and the light among the ruins emphasized the strange shapes and relief, which was not natural. Residents of the district began to talk about new phenomena. One farmer claimed that he saw a flickering light among the grass, which was moving against the wind. Another told of a mist that took the form of a man tall, unnaturally thin, motionless, but with eyes that followed every step. Sometimes these figures appeared and disappeared, leaving only a feeling of fear that squeezed his chest and made his legs give way. Passers-by who got too close to the ruins began to hear whispers. They were quiet, wriggling, incomprehensible. Sometimes it was just a low-frequency hum, similar to the rhythm of a heart, and sometimes it was something like breathing, slow and rhythmic, as if someone was breathing right next to it. Those who tried to identify the source of the sound found nothing. It came from all over space, from the ground, the fog, even the air above the fields. Paranormal researchers came again and again, but their instruments recorded only strange fluctuations and silhouettes that appeared on the cameras only for a fraction of a second. Magnetic devices jumped for no reason. Sound recorders picked up whispers that could not be deciphered. Everyone who tried to stay at the farm for at least one night returned pale, trembling and silent. Some said they saw George or Lucius in the fog, watching, but disappearing before they could figure out who it was. The fields seemed alive. The wind bent the grass into patterns that resembled waves, lines, and symbols. The ground sometimes shook under my feet, quietly, almost imperceptibly, but enough to make my heart stop. It seemed that someone or something was living under it, watching and waiting for a new traveler to appear who would not be able to return. The light among the ruins appeared more often at night. It fluctuated, changed shades and shape. Sometimes in its light, the outlines of figures that could not belong to the world of the living appeared. They glided along the ground, moved along patterns in the grass, and sometimes rose above the surface, as if trying to figure out who had come. The whispers grew louder as someone tried to approach, They intertwined with the wind, with the breathing of the field, with the beating of one's own heart, creating the feeling that everything around was a single being that was watching, analyzing, waiting. The animals avoided the farm. Cows did not enter the pasture, birds avoided the trees on the horizon, dogs fell silent and froze, sensing an invisible presence. And even the adults passing by felt a strange pressure, weakness in their legs and chest, which increased with every step. The legends of Lucas and George grew. George was declared insane, committed suicide, but left behind his memory and influence on the earth. Lucas died in the cell, but his shadow continued to glide across the fields. Those who saw his figure described it as motionless, tall, as if watching every step. Sometimes the figure would disappear into the mist, leaving only a feeling of cold breathing. Those who dared to approach the farm talked about the maze of time and space. The road to the ruins wasn't just a road, it was changing. The fields curved, the mist changed shape, the light wavered. Passers-by became disoriented, footsteps became difficult, and the sounds of footsteps and whispers did not match what could be seen. Lights, fog, whispers and bangs continued to appear even after the barn burned down. Locals spoke of observation nights, when the earth seemed to come alive. The fog was thickening to such an extent that the lantern did not give light beyond a few steps. Through the haze, footsteps, beats, and soft sounds could be heard that repeated the rhythm of the heart, but their source remained unknown. Those who tried to approach felt an invisible pressure and hopelessness, as if the earth itself was trying to hold them forever. George became part of the farm. He was checking the remains of the barn and the ground around it, moving slowly and carefully, as if he were performing a ritual. His gaze was cold and unwavering, and his movements were measured. It seemed that he could feel the earth, breathe with it, understand its language. The farm has become not just a place, but a living being, preserving the memory of the past, and watching everyone who dares to approach. Lucas disappeared completely, but the legends about him continued to live. His figure sometimes appeared in the misty depths of the fields, motionless and tall, with a cold breath, as if watching. The earth, the light, the whispers and the fog have become a single organism in which the road leads only one way. The anomalies were getting worse every day. The fog grew thicker, the whispers louder and clearer. The light moved among the ruins, creating the illusion of movement and life where there should have been only emptiness long ago. The fields curved and changed shape, as if the farm was building a new maze for anyone who tried to approach. Travelers avoided the farm. Truckers changed routes. Locals whispered that the road leads there forever, and there is no return. But sometimes there were brave souls who wanted to see the farm with their own eyes. They found themselves in a fog, where light, whispers and bumps created the feeling that the space around them was alive, and the earth itself was holding them in its arms. Even years after the burning of the house and barn, the land continued to preserve the memory of the Miltons. The place where the brothers once lived has become a portal between the surface and the depths, where the road leads only one way. The legends of the road of no return spread further and further, and everyone who heard them felt the cold breath of the earth, weakness and fear, reminding them that some places cannot be visited without consequences. The nights at the Milton farm were getting thicker, as if the stars themselves were avoiding the place. The fog that descended from the horizon was so dense that it seemed to be able to hold the breath of passers-by. The ground vibrated underfoot, softly but perceptibly, as if someone invisible was slowly running through the roots and voids under the fields. Every movement, a step, a sigh, the rustle of clothes seemed intensified, stretched, as in a nightmare where time and space obey not the laws of nature, but the will of the darkness that settled in this place. The light among the ruins moved in strange, unpredictable trajectories. He appeared and disappeared, changing shades and shapes, sometimes forming into shapes. Sometimes they looked like humans, but the eyes of these silhouettes were empty and cold, their movements unrealistically smooth. Those who watched them felt both fear and a strange attraction, as if an invisible force was beckoning them to it, promising knowledge that should not be there, and fear that could not be overcome. The fields were alive. The grass curved into patterns that repeated lines, symbols or maps that could only be understood after a long and painful madness. These lines moved with the fog, creating the illusion of beings hidden in space, who were both watching and leading. The ground sometimes trembled underfoot, gently but perceptibly, reminding her that someone or something was under her and watching every step. Residents of the district began to tell stories about new phenomena. One farmer saw how the light slowly rose from the ground and formed the silhouette of a man standing motionless, watching the fields. Another told about the fog, which seemed to come to life, bending around trees and buildings, creating the impression of movement where it could not be. The whispers became clearer. They intertwined with the wind, with the beating of the heart, with the breathing of the field, creating the feeling that everything around was a single being, alive and attentive. Passers-by felt pressure on their chests and weakness in their legs, as if the earth was pulling them in. Travelers who dared to cross the fields lost their bearings. Their steps became heavy and unhurried. Sometimes they saw the figures of George and Lucas standing in the fog, but these figures dissolved as soon as the person tried to approach, leaving only a cold breath and a feeling of emptiness that enveloped the whole body. Paranormal researchers came again and again. Their instruments recorded strange vibrations, silhouettes on cameras, low-frequency hum. Sound recorders picked up whispers that could not be deciphered. Everyone who tried to spend at least one night on the farm returned pale, trembling and silent, as if a part of their mind remained there, in the fog and light, among the whispers and blows that came from the ground. George, even after he was declared insane and sent to a psychiatric hospital, continued to influence the space. His presence, his rituals of observation, checking the ground and the ruins of the barn, created the feeling that he was part of the farm itself, its guardian and keeper of secrets, hidden beneath the surface. Lucas disappeared completely, but his shadow continued to slide between the mist and the light, watching everyone who dared to approach the ruined farm. Light, fog, whispers and blows, all this has become a single organism, living according to its own laws. At times the ground seemed to stretch and bend underfoot, creating a maze in which it was impossible to navigate. The road leading to the ruins changed shape, curved and narrowed, as if it was trying to hold the traveler and not let go. The animals avoided the farm, and the plants grew crookedly, as if trying to protect the land. The fields, forests, and remnants of the barn became part of a single mechanism that held the memory of the Miltons, their strange rituals, and the people who did not return. The few who saw the remnants of George or the misty Lucas felt a chill and anxiety seeping deep into their bones that could not be washed away or forgotten. The anomalies were getting worse every day. The fog thickened even faster. The whispers grew louder. The light among the ruins acquired its own consciousness and rhythm. The ground beneath her feet trembled more often, leaving the feeling that she was alive, that she was feeling, watching and holding. The road to the farm has ceased to be a road. It has become a maze that leads only one way. Locals were increasingly saying that the road without return is not only a physical space, but also a state of consciousness. Those who heard the legends felt the cold breath of the earth, weakness and fear that could not be ignored. Those who tried to approach felt that space was shrinking, that fog and light were moving independently of wind and time. The nights were getting longer and darker than ever. The stars above the fields were dimming, as if they were afraid to illuminate the land where the farm once stood. The fog had thickened so that it seemed as if it could absorb everything, even the light of a lantern. The whispers became more and more distinct, sometimes repeating the names of people who had disappeared here many years ago, sometimes creating new, alien words that were impossible to understand. The light among the ruins formed the outlines of figures that moved along the patterns in the grass. These movements were unreal, smooth, like in a nightmare. They repeated rhythms that coincided with breathing, heartbeat, and whispers, creating the feeling that the space around them was alive, that the earth itself was holding everyone who dared to approach. George became a part of this living space. He was checking the remains of the barn and the ground around it, every move precise, as if he was obeying some invisible logic that no one else understood. His eyes, cold and impassive, fixed everything around him, and his movements were calm and measured. It seemed that he breathed with the earth, understood its language, controlled light, fog, and whispers. The legends of Lucas and George continued to live on. Lucas's figure appeared in the misty depths of the fields, motionless and tall, with cold breath. The earth, the light, the whispers, and the fog have become a single organism where the road leads only one way, and there is no return. Those who tried to approach felt the cold breath of the earth, weakness and fear that could not be ignored. The place where the brothers once lived has become a portal between the surface and the depths, between life and death. The road to the ruins no longer belonged to humans. She lived by herself, twisted, changed, creating a maze from which it was impossible to escape. The legend of the road of no return spread further and further, and everyone who heard it felt that the earth, light, fog, and whispers were waiting for him, ready to draw him in forever. Night fell over the remains of the Milton farm like a black blanket, thick and cold, compressed so that it seemed to be able to suck the breath right out of his chest. The fog became thick, like a haze from someone else's dreams. Its density made it difficult to distinguish the ground underfoot, and hid every step, every sound. The empty fields where grass once grew became a living maze, where every path curved, as if the earth itself guided those who dared to approach. Every step was difficult. My feet sank into the soft, moist soil, which vibrated under my touch, emitting a barely audible hum, the rhythm of which coincided with the heartbeat of the person passing by. Light, which used to be random, has now acquired an independent life. It grew out of the ground, slowly rose and formed into shapes that moved independently of the wind and time. They were tall, thin, with crooked, distorted outlines. Their eyes were empty and cold, but their gaze seemed alive, watching. When someone tried to approach, the figures dissolved into the mist, leaving behind a sense of presence that could not be seen or explained. The fields continued to change shape. The grass curved into strange patterns that resembled symbols, lines, and maps. The wind bent them, creating the illusion of movement, and the further one advanced, the more intricate the patterns became. Sometimes it seemed that the earth itself was breathing, stretching and compressing space, holding those who stepped on it. Each step felt like the first, as if the road in front of his eyes was spreading and changing shape, dragging the traveler into a maze from which there is no way out. Those who tried to approach heard whispers. They were indistinct, writhing, sometimes resembling a breath, sometimes a blow. The whispers repeated the names of the disappeared people, alien words that were impossible to understand, and sometimes foreshadowed things that had not yet happened. The wind carried them through the fog, creating the feeling that the space around them was alive, attentive, capable of holding a person captive and simultaneously watching his every move. Animals no longer appeared near the ruins. Cows avoided pastures, birds avoided trees on the horizon, and dogs that happened to be nearby fell silent and trembled. Even adults felt a cold pressure on their chests and weakness in their legs, which increased with every step. The fields and the remains of the barn became part of a living mechanism that holds the memory of the Miltons, their rituals, and the people who did not return. Paranormal researchers came, but the instruments recorded only vibrations, silhouettes on cameras, and a low-frequency hum. Sound recorders picked up whispers that could not be deciphered. Those who tried to stay at the farm for at least one night returned pale, trembling, and silent. They said they saw George or Lucius in the fog, watching but disappearing before they could figure out who it was. The phenomena intensified every day. The fog thickened, the whispers grew louder, the light among the ruins acquired its own consciousness, moving, creating the illusion of life. The earth trembled more often, leaving the feeling that it was alive, that it was feeling, watching, and holding. The road to the farm was no longer an expensive one. It has become a one-way maze. George became a part of this living system. His movements were precise, like a ritual. His eyes were fixed on everything around him, cold and emotionless, and his movements were slow and calm. It seemed that he breathed with the earth, understood its language, controlled light, fog, and whispers. The legend of Lucas remained in the fog. His figure appeared between light and shadow, motionless, tall, with cold breath, as if watching. Each new phenomenon began to reinforce the feeling that the earth itself preserves the memory of the past. Whispers, bumps, light and fog combined into a single rhythm. Everyone who dared to approach felt that the road was shrinking under their feet, that the fog was penetrating inside, that the earth was pulling towards itself. Fields curved, light rose. Whispers repeated the names of the long gone. It was a system, a living organism that retained memory and forever changed those who came. The travelers began to avoid the road altogether. Truckers changed routes. Locals whispered that the road leads forever and there is no return. But sometimes daredevils appeared, explorers, curious or madmen, and found themselves in a fog where light, whispers and blows created the feeling that the space around them was alive. Their steps slowed down, their breathing became difficult, and weakness gripped their entire bodies. Sometimes they saw George or Lucas's figure, but they disappeared into the fog before they could get close. The light among the ruins grew brighter at times when the darkness seemed thicker. He took on the outlines of moving figures that glided across the grass and rose above the ground, creating the illusion of movement that was not there. The whispers repeated names, predicted the future, or created the feeling that it had already happened. The ground trembled and shrank, holding back those who dared to approach. The fields around the farm have become a living maze. The road to the ruins was more like a corridor of time and space, where direction and distance lost their meaning. The light, the fog, and the whispers formed a single entity that held and watched. Every movement, every sound was taken into account, woven into the rhythm of the earth. That night, when the fog was especially thick and the light among the ruins formed indistinct shapes, it seemed as if the earth itself had decided to complete the cycle. The whispers grew louder, the blows intensified, and space shrank so that the road disappeared. Those who tried to approach felt an invisible pressure that squeezed their chests, legs, and minds. The light soared above the ground, taking the form of a huge figure that wrapped around the fields and the ruins of the barn, and the mist dissolved into her body. The legends of George and Lucas ended at that moment. Lucas's figure disappeared. George disappeared into the light. The fog and whispers merged with the ground. Travelers who happened to be here felt the complete absence of a way back. The road without return has fully manifested itself. Those who got in her way became part of the living field, its breath, light, and whispers. The earth held them forever, and no one else could return, even if it seemed that everything was over. Since then, the place has known no peace. It has become a living monument to the Milton brothers, their rituals and secrets. The fog, light, and whispers continue to exist, reminding us that there are roads from which there is no escape, and fields where the earth decides who stays and who disappears forever. The few who see the remains of the farm feel cold breath, weakness, and fear that cannot be ignored. This place lives, breathes, and watches, preserves the memory of the past, and is ready to accept all those who set foot on the road of no return.